Hey, nerds. So, going to talk about this most recent debate with Candace Owens. Of course, I talked about that one with Jordan Peterson, pseudo-intellectual crackpot and former clinical psychologist. And of course, Candace Owens is a fucking wacko whose fame just keeps going up because she makes more and more ridiculous claims that just jump the shark all the time. And this is her arguing against feminism. I read her first book, unfortunately. It was like one of the fucking worst books I've ever read. What was it called? Blackout? It was so stupid. Read that if you want to lose brain cells. And then I bet she's on this because she has an upcoming book called Make Him a Sandwich. Yeah. She thinks women should all be like barefoot and pregnant, popping out babies and making sandwiches, even though she herself is like a full-time grifter political pundit who has a YouTube channel and a podcast, and she's doing what she says women can't do and shouldn't do. So she's just so oblivious to her own hypocrisy. And she's talking with this woman here about domestic violence rates. So I think it's an interesting claim. And what I did that Candace Owens clearly didn't do and never does is I didn't just look up one number that supports my claim. I took like 5 or 10 minutes to Google by asking the right questions and in terms of comparing domestic violence rates between different people in different types of relationships. And not only that, but between men and women and the relevant context and shit, and what studies are funded by whom and which ones are replicated. These are all very important questions to ask when you're making this audacious claim like that she gets into. So we'll get into the clip here.
I think that, just so I'm trying to understand your argument here, you think that if we didn't have the sexual revolution, less women or more women would be murdered? Are you saying that women are
more women would be murdered for sure?
Okay. I disagree with that. I still don't think it has anything to do with the claim that women are infinitely less happy because of the sexual revolution, which has devalued
I think
women.
you'd probably be...
Her original claim here was that the sexual revolution has made women unhappy because it's devalued them because they're all sluts who give it away for free. That's, as she says,
less happy if you're being murdered.
Oh,
that was a good one.
So I'm trying to understand your argument here. You think that if we didn't have the sexual revolution, less women or more women would be murdered? Are you saying that women are
more women would be murdered for sure?
Okay. I disagree with that. I still don't think it has anything to do with the claim that women are infinitely less happy because of the sexual revolution, which has devalued women.
I think you'd probably be less happy if you're being murdered.
Oh.
Anyone?
Okay. Yeah. I don't. Okay. Okay. There is definitely a correlation.
So, yeah, like Candace Owens, I'm not sure whether she actually spells it out, but I think she does at one point in this debate. It's worth watching because she makes all kinds of stupid claims and people make different arguments against her claims from different angles. I would have used different angles, but they were interesting nonetheless. And basically, yeah, she was, wait, what? Oh yeah, she's about to talk about her claim, in addition to one of the reasons that, as she says, the feminist movement has made women infinitely less happy, is that she's literally arguing with this woman because she literally thinks that before the sexual revolution, women were less abused than they are now. Like, feminism didn't help women get abused any less. Yeah, she really literally believes that. You almost don't even have to criticize her claims because they're so fucking ridiculous and stupid. Like, clearly that's not the case. And we're going to get into the most audacious claim here.
Between personal relationships and domestic violence. And just to be clear, if we're talking about just like a monogamous relationships, the most violent relationships that are on the books are between lesbian partners. Yes, when people are...
Lesbian relationships are the most violent relationships, okay? She's such a fucking idiot. Now look at this study here. One study, keep in mind that these fucking grifters are fucking scientifically illiterate. It's one study from 2013, hasn't been peer-reviewed or replicated. If you look up this organization that performed this study, it's called Stand for Families Free of Violence. It's a center-right think tank, as I expected. And the survey shows 61% of bisexual women and 44% of lesbian women. So, like, even according to her own logic, the bisexual women relationships, like women who are in relationships with both men and women, or sometimes they're in a relationship with a man, sometimes a woman, etc., reported intimate partner violence, domestic abuse compared to 35% of straight women. So you have to look up these studies, and there are studies from like years ago in a few different countries, but it seems, and they're all individual studies, and it doesn't seem like any of them have actually gotten replicated. So you have to look at the comparison of percentages of women abused in heterosexual relationships versus lesbian and bisexual relationships, and you can do this, and it says that women get abused, but women in bisexual relationships get abused more than women in lesbian relationships, and like women get abused by men in heterosexual relationships. Yes, women certainly abuse men sometimes, that's for sure, but men abuse more women in general, a lot more than women abuse men, because I bet Candace Owens would agree, although she's such a wacko, maybe she wouldn't, that men are kind of obviously inherently at least slightly more violent than women, if not more so. Like, how often do you hear of men getting raped by women? If men get raped, they usually get raped by men. And as conservatives point out all the time, which they think is a knockdown argument that actually defeats her own point here, the most rape that happens is men when they get raped by other men. So like that's their stupid statistic. So like it depends on the fucking context, right? Yeah, you could say more when men get raped than women, but they're men who are doing the raping, right? And like if you look at this globally, that's obviously not the case. Even if you look at prison populations, because there's a high percentage of people in prison in the US and lower and higher in other countries, right? So like globally, obviously a lot more women get raped than men, and a lot more women get abused by men, is the same point. Like, yes, men get abused, they get abused by women, but men get abused more by men than women, and women get abused by men, and women get abused more by men than women. So like she doesn't know how to contextualize these things, or actually I should forget that. She's just a grifter. So all she does is like look up one statistic that justifies her bias, and then she's scientifically illiterate, and she's too lazy to do any further research, so she doesn't take it 5 or 10 minutes to do any research, even though she has millions of people hanging on her every word with her fucking unbelievably hyperbolic and stupid claims. Yeah, she's so stupid.
That's not a true
that is actually true.
No, the statistic you're talking about is people who have faced domestic violence. Lesbians, yes, are more likely to have faced domestic violence, but that's because they typically came from relationships with men in which they were mistreated.
That's important fucking context that she unpacks there that I'm sure Candace Owens didn't even think about, or if she did, she didn't look into it at all, which is you could say that women in lesbian relationships are, even if you say, for the sake of argument, that lesbian relationships are the most violent relationships, which they clearly are not, it's because the women were with men before they were in relationships with women. So that maybe they're bisexual, or maybe they didn't realize they were lesbian, and then they're in a relationship with a man and they have kids with them, and then they have relationships with women when they're older, and the people in those lesbian relationships were abused by the men before they're in their relationships with the women. So even if you accept, for the sake of argument, that lesbian relationships are the most violent relationships, which clearly they are not, the women are getting abused by women, but most of those women are actually abused by the men before they get into the relationships with women. So do you see that based on the context, men are by far more violent and do more violence to women than women are violent towards women, or women do violence towards men? The point is that she's making the clear implication that women do more violence to each other than men do to women, which is clearly fucking bullshit on the face of it. Obviously, she's fucking stupid, and men are much more violent than women. Yes, women abuse women and women abuse men, but men are much more violent than women, and men abuse women much more then men abuse men. As conservatives say, they talk about these different inherent differences in biology and strength. Men tend to be stronger and more violent, so men rape women and men abuse women. So yeah, women abuse women and women abuse men, but clearly men abuse women a lot more than any other fucking abuse that ever happens. Women get way more abused than men. Candace Owens is fucking stupid.
Relationships are the most violent relationships that we have on the books.
But we can move
Statistically,
on.
they can fact check that claim. The point being is that it's not exactly a stunning statistic to say that when people
But that's because they typically came from relationships with men in which they were mistreated.
Lesbian relationships are the most violent relationships that we have on the books.
But we can move on.
They can fact check that claim. The point being is that it's not exactly a
I
stunning
did, and she's
statistic
wrong
to
as
say that when
usual.
people are in relationships, period, whether those relationships are homosexual, whether they're
Candace Owens relies on a lot of her followers to be really fucking stupid, and she gives them no credit whatsoever and expects them to be dumb and not actually look up any of the supposed facts or do any of that she mentions or do any of the supposed fact checks that she recommends. So she relies on her viewers being stupid and intellectually lazy, just like her, so that she can convince them of these fucking unbelievably outrageous and stupid claims, because she's a fucking fraud grifter.
But you're saying that the sexual revolution...
Let me finish. I've let you try to explain how this is correlated to happiness, and I don't think it does. I actually think you're having a different debate right now. But yes, absolutely, it makes perfect sense that you are more likely in general when you are in a relationship, because
this is a good point that she admits, though.
Are driven
kind
by
of
anger.
Obvious, so you shouldn't really get credit for it, but still.
Or by people that they know, whether or not we're talking about boyfriend and girlfriend.
Yeah, of course. Like, people in relationships are way more likely to be abused than single people, because they don't know the people who they're intimate with as well, and you're unfortunately more likely to abuse someone when you
girlfriend and girlfriend, a husband and a wife, a husband and a husband, or a wife and a wife. Yes, of course, the instances of domestic violence are going to take place when you're inside of a home. But the sexual revolution, encouraging women to give up their goods.
Yeah, as usual, Candace Owens is fucking dumb. At least she admits that people in relationships are much more likely to get abused than single people. But yeah, as usual, she's really fucking dumb, and literally is, if not directly saying, but literally implying that women abuse more women than men abuse men and men abuse women. So, but obviously it's clearly the fucking case that the most the most abuse that happens by men to women. So yes, men abuse, the highest amount of abuse that happens is men abusing women. Men abuse women a hell of a lot more than women abuse men, and women abuse women. So yeah, men do most of the abusing to women because they're stronger and they fucking can overpower them, as she would say a million times over. So yeah, Candace Owens, as always, is super fucking dumb, and no one should listen to any of her fucking stupid opinions.